Hi, I'm John DeVore. Welcome to the channel. Today's a record review, and short and sweet. The record it's the debut record as a band leader of vibraphonist Joel Ross. The album is Kingmaker. This came out, if my memory serves, this came out right pre-COVID or right around the very beginning of COVID. It's a nice double album. A lot of amazing music on this. I heard a couple of tracks on the radio one morning at breakfast and remember Shazamming it and then coming back to that Shazam a couple of months later and looking it up and finding it on vinyl. It's fantastic. I love the vibes as an instrument, and this guy is a great player. Different from some of the more traditional, like Milt Jackson or Lionel Hampton. A little brighter, maybe it's close mic, but I think he's also just sort of playing it. It has more of a sort of a bell-like kind of cut. Beautiful playing, really good. Musically, it's a great band that he has together. I think the band is called something silly and punny, like Good Vibes, Great Vibes, something like that maybe. He's the only vibe player in it, as far as I know, but great ensemble. Clearly an ensemble that works well playing together. I don't know if they've been playing together for a long time, because this is, like I said, it's his debut album. Musically, it's a medium-sized ensemble. It's not a big band, but it's not a small group. Very dynamic. A lot of dynamics in terms of the energy that comes out. There's these sort of beautiful, open, airy, light passages, but then but there's never any overplaying or muddiness. When things get intense, it is quite intense, but it's all beautifully ensemble played. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's one of the best mid-sized group recordings, jazz recordings I've heard in quite a while. New recordings, highly recommended. Also, sounds great. This is a great sounding record, no question about it. But it's funny. I hadn't put this record on in quite a while, maybe a year or something like that. And I was kind of digging around for something to play because I had just gotten a new piece of old gear. I've got a medium-sized collection of vintage hi-fi gear here that I like to sort of rotate in and out. And most of the vintage stuff, I'll pull it off the shelf, dust it off, get it into the system and enjoy it for a couple of days. But the system, the kinds of systems that I have set up in here tend to be, pretty high resolution and really tweaked. And so the vintageness sort of shows through to some extent. And I have some stuff that I really do love. I mean, I've got this old Sansui AU 9500 and TU 9500 integrated amp and tuner. And that is, if I'm correct, that was sort of the flagship Sansui gear from the founder of Sansui before he retired from the company. 70s stuff. And it is great. Big and bold, powerful sounding, but it's limited. It's limited resolution. It doesn't have a lot of delicacy and nuance to it. So fun, but and perfect in every way. Perfect for casual listening, background listening, stuff like that. But most days I spend some of the time, at least, conscious listening, sitting here on my couch. And focusing on listening to, at very least, to an album side, if not a whole album or more. And sometimes it's in the scope of working, sometimes it's in the scope of kind of needing to be able to focus better on what I'm doing and as a meditation. So there's a lot of reasons why I might be doing some real intentional listening. And the vintage stuff, generally speaking, not as good at retaining my concentration during these more intense listening sessions. And so, but I'm always on the lookout for something that can kind of straddle the two worlds. And there are a few things that I have in my collection that can do that, definitely. But I recently got in, it was another barter deal from a friend of mine in town who has a large he has a large inventory of used equipment that he buys and sells. And I noticed a piece that I had always been kind of curious about, but I had never heard in his inventory. And that is, it's a receiver. So this is an all-in-one unit. So that's tuner, preamp, and power amp all in one chassis. So this is a receiver from Magnum Dynalab. And I remember it came out in the 90s, maybe, yeah, it must have come out in the 90s. And I remember it because at that time I was selling Magnum Dynalab tuners. They were my favorite tuners, certainly on the market. They were probably the best tuners on the market at the time. May still very well be. I don't know what the competition is right now for tuners, but they always made beautiful, beautiful equipment. And they made, and it was a little bit out of the blue, but they made a receiver, which is essentially, at that time they were a tuner maker. They had no experience, no real qualifications for making an amplifier or a preamplifier or any of the other elements that go in to make a receiver. And so they're a Canadian company, and so they reached out to another Canadian company, Sim Audio, who was quite renowned for making amps and preamps and integrated amps, very highly regarded. And I actually did a couple of HiFi shows in the early 2000s. We showed the Silverback reference once at a show in New York with Sim Audio. It's great stuff. So anyway, so Magnum Dynalab reached out to Sim Audio, and the result was essentially a Sim Audio integrated amp combined with a Magnum Dynalab tuner in this beautiful package with sculptural wood side panels, kind of an hourglass sort of Coke bottle shape wood side panels, blended with also curved heat sinks. Magnum Dynalab always had analog meters on there for tuning, for center tuning and signal strength. Those are on there. Beautiful knob feel, just beautiful. I always coveted that receiver. And so I now have one. I fired it up a couple of days ago, and my system recently, for the past month or so, a couple of months, has been the Orangutan O reference system. It's our flagship system. But I wanted to throw the Magnum Dynalab, it's called the MD-208. I wanted to throw the Magnum Dynalab receiver into the system, but I didn't know how well it was working. I didn't know if it was going to be troublesome or anything like that. And I did not want to blow any of the OREF drivers because the OREF drivers are very expensive. For us, they're incredibly expensive to replace. So I threw in my returned review pair of O Babies. It's it's our sort of the entry level speaker that we make. Threw that in, fired up the Magnum Dynalab, and the Magnum Dynalab has a hard power switch on the back. It's like a rocker switch next to the power cord, which puts it essentially, I guess, into some sort of a standby. And then it has a little touch sensitive power switch on the front that brings it up to life. So I turned it on, fired it up, put on this record, put on Kingmaker, and it was shrill and glassy, and the vibe sound, which I remembered as being definitely sort of closer and more bright sounding than a lot of other vibe players, but I hadn't remembered it being shrill or hard sounding or that kind of aggressive or grainy. So I turned it off and I played radio on it for a couple of days and went back, and then this morning I put Kingmaker back on to that same system, O Babies, with the Magnum Dynalab receiver, and it sounded glorious. So that is, we attribute that to warm up. We attribute that to getting things settled. My O Baby speakers hadn't been played in quite a few months, so they needed to sort of get woken up again. For whatever reason, I was just drawn into it, And even though my system has decreased in cost easily by an order of magnitude, it was the record absolutely sold it. Every bit as wonderful and intriguing and captivating. So that was a little bit of a side note. It made it less of a quickie music review, but it really sort of goes to show that it's not about how much money you spend on a system. It's really about balance. It's about how you put the stuff together. And there are little jewels of high-end audio to be found all over the place. Vintage, new, expensive, affordable, large, small. All manner of things can be put together in the right way. And if you do it carefully and mindfully, and maybe following the advice of experts, you can put together systems at any price point. Very satisfying systems. And so that is my long-winded goodbye, and thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video. Bye.